If a stranger stood up at your wedding and screamed, "She's lying to you," would you still put the ring on her finger? The massive cathedral in downtown Manhattan glowed beneath rows of golden chandeliers, every marble surface reflecting wealth, power, and old family prestige. Reporters crowded outside behind velvet barriers while inside, New York's elite sat in silence, waiting for the most anticipated billionaire wedding of the year to finally begin. Ethan Calloway stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. At 34, he was the youngest billionaire on the East Coast to take a family empire public, a man financial magazines called ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. But none of those people noticed the exhaustion behind his blue eyes tonight. None of them saw the way his fingers hesitated slightly around the sapphire wedding ring resting in his palm. Across from him stood Olivia Bennet in a satin ivory gown that looked almost too soft for a room this cold. She looked beautiful, but not in the polished way Manhattan socialites usually did. There was something quieter about her. Real. Her hands trembled slightly as the priest spoke, her eyes lifting toward Ethan for only a second before quickly falling away again. The room smelled faintly of roses and expensive perfume, but Olivia could still hear her mother's voice in the back of her mind from 3 nights earlier. "You don't have to do this, sweetheart." But she did, because hospital bills did not disappear. Alzheimer's did not pause for love stories, and powerful families did not offer second chances. The organ music softened as the priest smiled warmly. "The rings, please." Ethan slowly lifted the sapphire ring. The deep blue stone had once belonged to his mother, the only person he had ever trusted completely before she died. He had sworn he would never use it, never hand it to another woman, never believe in marriage. Yet somehow Olivia Bennet had made him break every rule he ever built around himself. The cathedral became impossibly quiet as Ethan reached for her hand. Olivia looked up at him, and for a brief moment the walls around both of them seemed to disappear. No board members, no cameras, no contract, just him, just her. Ethan slid the ring halfway onto her finger when suddenly a chair scraped violently against the marble floor. "Stop!" A female voice shouted from the back of the cathedral. Gasps ripped through the crowd as hundreds of heads turned at once. A young blonde woman stood near the last row, breathing hard, her eyes locked directly onto Ethan. "Don't put that ring on her," she yelled again, her voice shaking through the church. "She's using you." The entire room froze. Olivia's face went completely pale. Ethan's hand stopped moving instantly, the sapphire ring still caught between his fingers and Olivia's trembling hand. Whispering exploded across the cathedral like wildfire. Camera flashes burst near the entrance despite security trying to stop them. Ethan slowly turned toward the woman, his expression darkening by the second. "Who are you?" he asked coldly. But before the woman could answer, Olivia suddenly whispered something so quietly only Ethan could hear it. "I can explain." And for the first time since meeting her, Ethan felt something dangerous crawl into his chest. Doubt. 3 months earlier, Olivia Bennet stood in the dim storage room beneath the Ashford Museum of Art, with white cotton gloves on her hands and tears burning quietly behind her eyes. Rain tapped softly against the basement windows while the old ventilation system rattled above her head. The museum smelled like dust, old paper, and oil paint slowly fading with time. Usually that smell comforted her. Tonight it only reminded her that everything she loved was disappearing. She carefully restored the cracked edge of a 19th century landscape painting under a warm desk lamp when her phone suddenly vibrated inside her coat pocket. Her stomach tightened immediately. Only one person called this late anymore. "Mom," Olivia answered softly. For a moment, there was only silence on the other end. Then came her mother's trembling voice. "Sweetheart, I forgot where I parked the car again." Olivia closed her eyes instantly. The doctor had warned them the memory loss would progress faster than expected, but hearing the fear in her mother's voice still felt like someone quietly breaking her heart piece by piece. "It is okay," Olivia whispered gently. "Stay where you are. I am coming." 20 minutes later, she found her mother sitting alone outside a grocery store in Queens, clutching a half-melted carton of ice cream in the cold November air. Her silver hair was messy from the wind, her cardigan buttoned unevenly. "I am sorry," her mother whispered the second Olivia sat beside her. "I know I keep becoming a burden." Olivia forced a smile even though exhaustion sat heavy in her chest. You are not a burden. But deep down, she was terrified. The medication bills were already drowning her. The museum had announced layoffs 2 weeks earlier. And tonight, her landlord had taped a final warning notice on her apartment door. By the time Olivia got home after midnight, Manhattan looked washed in silver rain and blurred taxi lights. Her tiny apartment felt colder than usual. She dropped her keys on the counter and froze when she noticed an envelope sitting beneath her door. No stamp, no return address, just her name written in sharp black ink. Olivia slowly opened it. Inside was a cream-colored invitation card embossed with gold lettering. Callaway Holdings requests your presence. Beneath it was a time, a private address on the Upper East Side, and one final sentence, a proposal that could change your life. Olivia almost laughed. Rich people always talk like that, like they were filming their own movie. She should have thrown the card away immediately. Instead, 2 days later, she found herself standing outside a towering penthouse overlooking Central Park while snow drifted lightly across the city skyline. The elevator doors opened into silence, so perfect it felt expensive. Dark marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a fireplace stretching across an entire wall, and standing near the glass with one hand in his pocket was Ethan Callaway himself. Even before he turned around, she recognized him instantly. Every business magazine in America had printed his face at least once that year. Ethan finally looked at her, his blue eyes calm but unreadable. Miss Bennett, he said smoothly. Thank you for coming. Olivia folded her coat tighter around herself. Your assistant said this was urgent. It is. Ethan walked toward her slowly, every movement controlled, polished, distant. Then he placed a thin stack of papers on the glass coffee table between them. Olivia looked down at the first page and immediately felt the air leave her lungs. Marriage agreement. Her eyes snapped back toward him in disbelief. Ethan's expression never changed. Marry me for 6 months, he said quietly, and I will solve every problem in your life. Olivia stared at the marriage agreement as snow drifted slowly beyond the massive penthouse windows behind Ethan Callaway. For a few seconds, she honestly wondered if this was some kind of joke rich people played when they got bored. Her eyes moved across the pages again. 6 months. Public appearances required. Confidentiality mandatory. Financial compensation guaranteed. The words blurred together until one number finally caught her attention. $2 million. Her throat tightened instantly. That amount alone could pay for her mother's treatment for years. It could save the museum from shutting down. It could stop the collection notices piling beside her apartment door every morning. Ethan watched her carefully from across the room, his expression calm, almost detached. Like this conversation was simply another business deal waiting to be signed. Why me? Olivia finally asked quietly. Ethan walked toward the fireplace, loosening the cuff of his expensive watch before answering. Because you are invisible. The words hit harder than she expected. Olivia blinked. Excuse me. Ethan looked back at her, his blue eyes unreadable in the firelight. You are not connected to my world. No scandals. No social media following. No political ties. You restore paintings in a museum most people have never heard of. My board will see you as harmless. Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. So you need someone ordinary. I need someone temporary. The room fell silent except for the crackling fire behind him. Olivia should have walked away immediately. Every instinct told her this arrangement was dangerous. Cold. Wrong. But then her phone buzzed softly inside her purse. She glanced down at the hospital notification lighting the screen. Payment overdue. Her chest tightened so fast, she could barely breathe. Ethan noticed the expression on her face immediately. Your mother's treatment, he said quietly. Olivia looked up sharply. How do you know about that? I know everything before making an offer. Something about the answer unsettled her deeply. Ethan stepped closer to the table and slid a second document toward her. The museum board plans to shut down the restoration department next month, he added. Your position disappears with it. Olivia stared at him in disbelief. Did you investigate my entire life? I prepared. His voice remained calm, but there was exhaustion hidden beneath it now, the kind that did not come from work alone. Olivia looked around the enormous penthouse again. The space was beautiful but strangely empty. No family photos. No warmth. No signs that anyone actually lived there. Even the silence felt lonely. Why does a billionaire need a fake wife? She asked softly. Ethan's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Because my grandfather's will requires me to be married before the end of the fiscal year if I want to remain chief executive officer of Callaway Holdings. Olivia frowned. That is insane. Welcome to my family. For the first time since she arrived, something human flickered across Ethan's face. Not arrogance. Not confidence. Exhaustion. Like a man who had spent too many years carrying expectations he never chose. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and carefully placed a small velvet box on the table. Olivia slowly opened it. Inside rested a sapphire ring so deep blue it almost looked black beneath the firelight. It was elegant without trying to be. Old money. Old history. Ethan stared at the ring for a long moment before speaking again. It belonged to my mother. His voice lowered slightly. The press already knows I intend to use it. Olivia looked at him carefully now. And what happens after 6 months? Ethan's expression hardened again instantly, the walls around him snapping back into place. After 6 months, he said coldly, we become strangers again. Olivia swallowed hard as snow continued falling outside the windows of Manhattan. Then slowly, almost against her own better judgment, she reached for the pen. The first thing Olivia noticed about Ethan Callaway's world was how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, controlled quiet. The kind built by money thick enough to keep the outside world away. 3 days after signing the agreement, she stood inside the enormous dressing suite of his Upper East Side penthouse, while 2 stylists circled around her adjusting fabrics, measuring jewelry, and discussing her appearance like she was a project instead of a person. Her posture needs refinement, one woman whispered. And definitely softer makeup. Mr. Callaway's image is sophisticated. Olivia stared at her own reflection beneath the bright vanity lights. She barely recognized herself anymore. The woman in the mirror wore a cream cashmere dress that probably cost more than 6 months of her rent. Her hair had been styled into soft waves. Diamonds rested lightly against her neck like they belonged there. But her nervous eyes still looked exactly the same. One of the stylists handed her a pair of silver heels. These are custom Italian. Olivia looked at the impossible height of them. Do people in Manhattan actually walk in these? The woman blinked once, confused whether she was joking. Before she could answer, a familiar deep voice spoke from the doorway. Not successfully. Olivia turned quickly. Ethan stood there in a charcoal suit, one hand in his pocket, watching her with the faintest trace of amusement in his eyes. For the first time since she met him, he almost looked relaxed. The stylists immediately straightened. Mr. Callaway, they greeted together. Ethan nodded once before dismissing them calmly. The room emptied within seconds, leaving only silence behind. Olivia exhaled softly. I think your employees are afraid of you. Ethan loosened the cuff of his watch slightly. Smart people usually are. Olivia laughed quietly before she could stop herself. Ethan looked at her for a moment longer than necessary, and something strange shifted in the room. Not romance. Not yet. Just awareness. Dangerous awareness. Olivia quickly looked away first. What is tonight again? She asked. The Whitmore Foundation Gala, Ethan answered. Half the people there will pretend to care about charity while secretly competing for business deals. Sounds fun. It will not be. He crossed the room and carefully placed a small velvet box beside her. Olivia opened it slowly and froze when she saw the sapphire ring again. Even beneath the soft lighting, the stone glowed deep blue like midnight water. Wear it tonight, Ethan said quietly. Olivia looked up. Already. The engagement announcement goes public in 1 hour. Her stomach twisted instantly. That fast. Ethan's expression turned distant again, businesslike, controlled. In my world, hesitation looks like weakness. Olivia studied him carefully now. He always spoke about his life like he was surviving it instead of living it. She slid the ring carefully onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Too perfectly. Ethan noticed the expression on her face immediately. My assistant estimated your size from the museum security footage. Olivia stared at him in disbelief. That is either incredibly thoughtful or deeply terrifying. To her surprise, Ethan actually smiled. A real smile this time. Brief. Warm. Gone almost instantly. But Olivia saw it. And somehow that made him more dangerous than before. An hour later, black SUVs lined the glowing entrance of the Whitmore Hotel while camera flashes exploded across the sidewalk. Olivia stepped out beside Ethan, nearly blinded by reporters shouting questions from every direction. Ethan, Is this your fiancé? Miss Bennet, how did you meet? Our wedding plan's already happening. Olivia froze for half a second under the chaos until suddenly she felt Ethan's hand lightly press against the small of her back. Steady. Grounding. Just keep walking, he murmured softly near her ear. The warmth of his voice sent unexpected nervousness through her chest. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers shimmered above hundreds of Manhattan elites dressed in diamonds and designer suits. Conversations softened the second Ethan entered the room beside Olivia. People stared openly now, judging, measuring, calculating her worth within seconds. Olivia could practically hear their thoughts. Too ordinary, too unknown, too poor. A tall blonde woman in a silver gown approached with a polished smile sharp enough to cut glass. Ethan, she said smoothly before finally looking Olivia up and down. You certainly move on quickly. Ethan's entire expression cooled instantly. Victoria. Olivia felt tension slide through the air between them. Victoria extended her hand toward Olivia without warmth. Victoria Hale, she said elegantly. I used to be the woman everyone expected Ethan to marry. Olivia forced herself to shake Victoria Hale's hand even though every instinct told her not to trust the woman standing in front of her. Victoria's smile never quite reached her eyes. She looked flawless beneath the ballroom lights, every blonde strand perfectly in place, every word measured like a weapon disguised as elegance. I have heard so much about you, Victoria said smoothly while her gaze drifted toward Olivia's sapphire ring. Although I admit, none of us expected Ethan to choose someone so unexpected. Olivia felt the insult hidden beneath the compliment immediately. Before she could answer, Ethan stepped slightly closer beside her. Olivia and I are very happy, he said flatly. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Of course you are. Then she leaned closer toward Olivia just enough for only her to hear. Be careful with this family. They only love people they can control. The warning unsettled Olivia more than the insult itself. Victoria pulled away gracefully seconds later as another group of investors approached Ethan for conversation. Suddenly Olivia found herself alone beneath the enormous chandeliers while strangers quietly studied her from every corner of the ballroom. Wealthy women whispered behind champagne glasses. Older men glanced at her with polite suspicion. She had spent her whole life invisible in New York City. Tonight, every eye in the room seemed locked onto her. Olivia moved toward one of the quieter hallways near the terrace doors, finally able to breathe again away from the cameras and forced smiles. She reached into her purse and pulled out the old cassette player her mother used to carry everywhere years ago. The silver edges were scratched now, one corner held together with tape, but it still worked. Barely. Olivia slipped in one earbud and pressed play softly. A gentle Frank Sinatra song crackled through the tiny speaker beneath the noise of the gala. Her mother used to play it while cooking pasta on Sunday nights before the memory loss began stealing pieces of her away. You do not look like someone enjoying a $5,000 charity dinner. Olivia startled slightly and turned to find Ethan standing behind her near the terrace doors, one hand loosened around his tie. I am trying to survive it, she admitted. Ethan glanced toward the tiny cassette player in her hands. That thing still works? Olivia smiled faintly. Sometimes. Ethan studied her quietly for a moment before nodding toward the ballroom. You disappeared. Your world is exhausting. To her surprise, Ethan gave a quiet laugh under his breath. You are not wrong. Snow drifted softly beyond the glass terrace windows while the city shimmered below them in silver and gold light. For the first time all night, Ethan looked less like a billionaire and more like a man simply tired of pretending. Olivia noticed the faint shadows beneath his eyes. Do you hate these events? She asked softly. Ethan leaned against the wall beside her. I hate what people become inside them. Olivia looked at him carefully. And what do people become around you? Ethan's expression darkened slightly. Careful. The answer came too fast. Too practiced. Olivia suddenly understood something important about Ethan Calloway. It was not arrogance that made him distant. It was disappointment. The kind built slowly after years of betrayal. Before she could respond, raised voices suddenly echoed near the ballroom entrance. Olivia looked over just in time to see an older man in an expensive navy tuxedo angrily scolding one of the catering staff after red wine accidentally spilled across the marble floor. The young waiter looked terrified, apologizing repeatedly while guests nearby pretended not to notice. You people are completely incompetent, the man snapped loudly. Olivia's stomach tightened instantly. Without thinking, she crossed the room toward them. Ethan watched in surprise. Sir, Olivia interrupted calmly before the man could continue humiliating the waiter. It was an accident. The older man turned sharply. Excuse me. Olivia grabbed a linen napkin from the tray nearby and knelt to help clean the spill herself. The floor is fine, she said gently to the waiter. Go get another bottle before your manager sees this. The waiter blinked at her gratefully before hurrying away. Around them, conversation slowed as nearby guests quietly watched the scene unfold. The older man looked offended. Do you even know who I am? Olivia stood slowly. No, she answered honestly. But I know what kind of person embarrasses someone making $11 an hour in front of a ballroom full of millionaires. The silence afterward felt enormous. Ethan stared at Olivia from across the room with an expression she could not read at all anymore. The ballroom remained silent for almost 3 full seconds after Olivia's words landed across the marble floor. The older investor's face turned dark red beneath the chandelier lights while nearby guests awkwardly looked away into their champagne glasses, pretending they had not heard anything. Ethan walked toward Olivia slowly, his expression unreadable. For one dangerous moment, she honestly thought she had ruined everything. This was his world, his investors, his reputation, and she had just embarrassed one of Manhattan's most powerful men in front of half the financial elite in New York City. But then something unexpected happened. Ethan looked directly at the older investor and said calmly, I believe my fiancé is correct. The room shifted instantly. Olivia felt it. Power always moved the air around rich people, and the second Ethan sided with her, the balance changed. The investor forced a stiff smile. Of course, no harm done. He walked away without another word while whispers spread quietly across the ballroom. Olivia turned toward Ethan the second they were alone again near the terrace corridor. I am sorry, she said quickly. I should not have interfered. Ethan stared at her for a long moment before answering. No one in this room has spoken honestly to those people in years. His voice was quieter now, softer somehow. Including me. Olivia did not know what to say to that. Ethan glanced toward the ballroom, where investors laughed beneath crystal chandeliers, pretending nothing uncomfortable had happened. Do you know what the strange part is? He asked. They will respect you more now. Olivia frowned slightly. Because I defended a waiter? Because you were not afraid of them. The words settled heavily between them. Ethan studied her carefully again, like he was trying to understand something that did not fit into the world he knew. Then suddenly his phone buzzed sharply in his pocket. The warmth vanished from his expression almost instantly as he glanced at the screen. I need to take this, he said. Olivia nodded softly. Go. Ethan stepped away toward one of the private hallways while Olivia remained near the terrace doors watching snow drift slowly over Manhattan outside. Her chest still felt tight from adrenaline. She reached for the cassette player in her purse again, needing something familiar to calm her thoughts. But before she could press play, an older woman's voice spoke beside her. You embarrassed Richard Patterson in front of half the city. Olivia turned quickly. An elegant elderly woman stood there wrapped in a dark emerald gown, silver hair pinned neatly above sharp, intelligent eyes. Yet unlike everyone else tonight, her gaze held amusement instead of judgment. I am sorry, Olivia answered carefully. The woman smiled faintly. Do not apologize. It was refreshing. She extended one hand gracefully. Margaret Calloway. Olivia nearly stopped breathing. Ethan's grandmother. The woman most business magazines called the real power behind Calloway Holdings. Olivia shook her hand carefully. Margaret glanced toward the hallway Ethan disappeared into moments earlier. My grandson rarely smiles anymore, she said quietly. Tonight, he almost did. Olivia looked down instinctively. This arrangement is temporary. Margaret's expression sharpened immediately, as though she noticed more than Olivia intended to reveal. Temporary things, she said softly, are often the ones that change us permanently. Before Olivia could respond, raised voices suddenly echoed from the hallway nearby. Ethan's voice, cold, controlled, furious beneath the surface. Olivia turned instinctively toward the sound. The hallway doors had not fully closed, leaving a narrow opening. She should have walked away immediately. Instead, she froze when she heard Victoria Hale speaking inside. You are making a mistake with this girl, Victoria snapped quietly. The board already thinks you are unstable after your father's death. Ethan's voice lowered dangerously. Do not speak about my father. Olivia's stomach tightened. She had never heard emotion in his voice before now. I am trying to protect you, Victoria insisted. This marriage makes you vulnerable. Ethan laughed once under his breath, but there was no humor in it. No, Victoria. What makes me vulnerable is trusting people who only see me as a business opportunity. Silence followed. Then Victoria spoke again, quieter this time. You used to trust me. Olivia stepped back from the doorway immediately before either of them noticed her standing there. Her heart pounded harder now for reasons she could not explain. Because for the first time since signing the contract, she realized something dangerous. Ethan Calloway was not as emotionally untouchable as the world believed. Over the next few weeks, Olivia slowly learned that being engaged to Ethan Calloway felt less like joining a family and more like walking through a perfectly polished battlefield. Every dinner carried hidden tension beneath the expensive wine and silver candlelight. Every board meeting disguised itself as polite conversation, while powerful people quietly fought for control behind smiles. And somehow, despite herself, Olivia began understanding why Ethan trusted almost no one. One snowy evening in early December, Olivia sat alone inside the penthouse library while soft jazz played quietly from her old cassette player beside her. The room was enormous, lined floor to ceiling with dark wooden shelves and first edition books that looked untouched. She had spent the last hour restoring a damaged watercolor painting Ethan's mother once loved, carefully repairing tiny cracks beneath the warm glow of a reading lamp. It calmed her. Restoring broken things always had. She barely noticed Ethan enter until his voice drifted softly through the room. You missed dinner. Olivia looked up to find him standing near the doorway with loosened sleeves and exhaustion written all over his face. Snow clung lightly to the shoulders of his black coat. I was not hungry, she answered gently. Ethan glanced toward the painting in her hands. That belonged to my mother. Olivia nodded. The frame was damaged. Ethan walked closer slowly, studying the artwork for a long moment before speaking again. You fixed it. I tried. Silence settled between them, softer now than before, comfortable in a way neither of them expected. Ethan removed his coat and draped it over a nearby chair before quietly sitting across from her. Olivia noticed the faint tension still lingering around his eyes. Bad meeting? She asked carefully. Ethan gave a humorless laugh. In my family, there are only bad meetings and worse meetings. Olivia smiled faintly before returning her attention to the painting. You know, she said softly, normal people usually eat dinner before discussing corporate warfare. Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair, watching her. Normal people usually do not agree to fake marriages with billionaires. Olivia laughed quietly before she could stop herself. The sound surprised both of them. Ethan stared at her for a second too long again, his expression unreadable beneath the low golden light. Then suddenly the penthouse lights flickered once, twice, and everything went dark. Olivia blinked in surprise as the city skyline disappeared behind black windows. Please tell me billionaires pay their electric bill, she said into the darkness. To her surprise, Ethan laughed. A real laugh this time. Warm, uncontrolled, human. Somewhere in the darkness, Olivia heard him moving carefully toward the kitchen area. Moments later, soft candlelight flickered across the room as Ethan returned carrying 2 small candles. The warm glow softened everything around him, the sharp edges, the coldness, even the loneliness in his eyes. Snow continued falling outside, while Manhattan glimmered faintly in the distance beneath the storm. This building loses power every winter, Ethan admitted while placing one candle beside her. The backup generators usually kick in after a few minutes. Olivia looked around the darkened penthouse. It feels different like this. Different good or different terrifying? Different honest. Ethan grew quiet after that. The candlelight danced softly across his face, while jazz music crackled faintly through the cassette player nearby. Olivia noticed him staring at the old device again. My mother used to play that exact Sinatra album every Sunday, Ethan said unexpectedly. Olivia looked up in surprise. Mine too. For a second, neither of them moved at all. Then Ethan spoke again, his voice quieter now. After my mother died, I stopped listening to music for almost 5 years. Olivia's chest tightened slightly. Why? Ethan looked toward the snowy windows instead of her. Because silence hurt less. The answer settled heavily between them. Olivia suddenly understood that Ethan's coldness had never been cruelty. It had been grief wearing expensive suits and pretending to be control. Before she realized what she was doing, she reached across the table and lightly touched his hand. Ethan froze instantly beneath her fingertips. Not pulling away, not breathing either, just still. The entire room seemed to hold its breath with him. Then softly, almost like he hated himself for wanting comfort at all, Ethan turned his hand slightly and held hers back. After that night in the candlelit library, something between Olivia and Ethan quietly changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but in small, dangerous ways that felt far more real than either of them wanted to admit. He started coming home earlier from meetings just to find her restoring paintings in the library. She started memorizing the sound of his footsteps crossing the penthouse after midnight. Their fake engagement slowly began feeling less like an arrangement and more like a life neither of them expected to want. One snowy Saturday morning, Olivia stood barefoot in the penthouse kitchen wearing one of Ethan's oversized sweaters while attempting to make pancakes from scratch. Smoke drifted lightly from the skillet while Frank Sinatra crackled softly through the cassette player beside the coffee machine. "I thought museum girls were supposed to be elegant," Ethan said dryly from the doorway. Olivia jumped slightly and turned toward him with a spatula in her hand. "I am elegant." Ethan glanced toward the burned pancake currently collapsing in the pan. "That pancake died for your confidence." Olivia laughed despite herself. Ethan stood there for a second, simply watching her laugh, and something in his expression softened in a way that scared her a little, because it looked dangerously close to happiness. Real happiness. Not the polished kind he performed for cameras and investors. The kind he probably had not felt in years. Olivia quickly looked away first, suddenly too aware of how close they had become lately. "You are staring," she murmured quietly. Ethan loosened his tie slightly, his eyes never leaving her. "You are different in the morning." Olivia frowned. "How?" "You smile before you remember to hide it." The words hit her harder than they should have. Before she could answer, Ethan's phone buzzed sharply across the marble counter. The warmth vanished from his face almost instantly the second he saw the caller ID. "What is it?" Olivia asked softly. Ethan picked up the phone but did not answer immediately. "Board meeting," he said flatly. "Which usually means someone is trying to stab me politely in a conference room." Olivia watched the familiar emotional walls return around him piece by piece. The cold billionaire mask sliding back into place. But this time she noticed something else too. Exhaustion. Real exhaustion. Ethan noticed her watching him. "Do not look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you feel sorry for me." Olivia stepped closer carefully. "I do not feel sorry for you." Ethan raised an eyebrow slightly. "No. I think you are lonely." Silence filled the kitchen instantly. Ethan stared at her with an expression almost too raw to hide quickly enough. Olivia immediately realized she had crossed into dangerous territory. But before either of them could speak again, the penthouse elevator doors opened unexpectedly down the hallway. Sharp heels clicked across the marble floor seconds later. Victoria Hale appeared in the kitchen wearing a white winter coat and an unreadable smile. Olivia stepped back instinctively. Ethan's entire posture hardened. "You should have called first," he said coldly. Victoria ignored him completely at first, her gaze landing instead on Olivia standing there in Ethan's sweater beside the ruined pancakes. Something dark flickered briefly across her face before disappearing behind elegance again. "I see domestic life suits you both," she said smoothly. Olivia folded her arms slightly. "What are you doing here?" Victoria reached into her designer bag and placed a thin folder carefully onto the kitchen island. "I came to save Ethan from making a catastrophic mistake." Ethan's jaw tightened immediately. "Enough, Victoria." But she ignored him again, turning directly toward Olivia now. "Do you know what happens to people who become emotionally attached to this family?" Olivia frowned slightly. "What are you talking about?" Victoria slowly opened the folder. Inside were printed financial records, confidential documents, and photographs from corporate meetings. Olivia barely understood what she was looking at until one name suddenly appeared over and over again across the pages. Ethan Calloway, followed by another phrase that made her blood run cold. Removal vote. Ethan stepped forward instantly and slammed the folder shut before Olivia could read more. "That is enough." His voice had turned dangerously quiet now. Victoria looked at him with something strangely close to pity. You still do not see it, do you? She whispered softly. Your family is not planning a wedding, Ethan. Her eyes shifted toward Olivia one final time. They are planning your replacement. The second Victoria left the penthouse, silence crashed heavily across the kitchen. Snow drifted softly outside the windows while the ruined pancakes cooled untouched on the counter between Olivia and Ethan. He stood motionless beside the kitchen island, jaw tight, one hand pressed against the closed folder like he could physically stop the truth inside from existing. Olivia watched him carefully. Was she telling the truth? Ethan gave a humorless laugh beneath his breath. Victoria usually tells the truth in the most destructive way possible. Olivia stepped closer slowly. Ethan. He looked away instantly toward the city skyline. The board has wanted me out for years, he admitted quietly. My father built Callaway Holdings like a monarchy. Loyalty mattered more than competence. After he died, half the company started waiting for me to fail. Olivia's chest tightened. And the marriage? Ethan loosened his tie sharply like he suddenly could not breathe inside it anymore. The marriage protects my voting position temporarily. Married executives appear stable to investors. Families trust married men more. The words should have sounded cold, strategic, businesslike. Instead, they sounded exhausted. Olivia stared at the folder again. Then Victoria is trying to help you. Ethan's eyes darkened immediately. No. Victoria is trying to control me before someone else does. Silence settled heavily again. Then softly, almost against her better judgment, Olivia reached for the folder. Ethan stopped her instantly. Do not. Why? For the first time since she met him, real fear flickered across Ethan's face. Not fear for himself. Fear for her. Because if you start seeing what my family really is, he said quietly, you may never look at me the same way again. The words stayed with Olivia long after Ethan disappeared into his office later that night. Hours passed. Midnight came and went while Manhattan glowed silver beneath falling snow outside the penthouse windows. Olivia could not sleep. She wandered quietly through the dark apartment wrapped in one of Ethan's sweaters, the old cassette player humming softly in her hands. As she passed the library, she noticed light still glowing beneath Ethan's office door. She hesitated only a second before knocking gently. Go away, Ethan said immediately from inside. Olivia ignored him and slowly opened the door anyway. Ethan sat alone at his desk with his sleeves rolled up, surrounded by financial reports and legal documents. Half-empty coffee cups sat scattered around the room. He looked exhausted. More than exhausted. Defeated. Ethan barely looked up when she entered. You should be asleep. Olivia crossed the room quietly. You should too. Ethan rubbed one hand across his face before leaning back in his chair. I used to think if I worked hard enough, I could earn loyalty from these people. His voice sounded distant now. But in this family, loyalty only lasts until money changes direction. Olivia watched him carefully beneath the soft office lighting. For the first time since meeting Ethan Callaway, she saw not the billionaire, not the powerful chief executive officer, just a lonely man carrying pressure so heavy he had forgotten how to ask anyone for help. Without speaking, Olivia walked toward the bookshelf beside his desk and placed the cassette player down carefully. Sinatra's soft voice crackled quietly through the room. Ethan looked up at her slowly. What are you doing? Olivia smiled faintly. My mother always said silence makes sad people think too much. Something in Ethan's expression nearly broke then. He stared at her like he wanted to say something dangerous, something honest. Instead, he looked down at the stack of documents again. Olivia's eyes drifted across the papers scattered beside him until one page caught her attention. A confidential merger agreement. Beneath it sat another document partially hidden underneath. Board removal procedure. Olivia frowned slightly. Ethan. He immediately reached forward and turned the paper face down too quickly. Too defensively. Olivia noticed. What are you not telling me? Ethan stood abruptly from his chair and walked toward the windows overlooking Manhattan. Snow continued falling quietly beyond the glass. If the board removes me after the wedding, he said softly, I lose everything. Olivia stepped closer behind him. You still have your company. Ethan shook his head once. No, his voice lowered almost to a whisper now. I lose the only thing my father ever believed made me worth loving. Olivia's heart broke a little hearing that, because suddenly she understood the real tragedy of Ethan Callaway. It was not the pressure, not the billions, not the betrayal. It was that somewhere along the way, He had confused being successful with being worthy of love at all.